My name is Stephanie Grace. I am a columnist for the newspaper here in town, which goes by many names. The Times-Picayune, The Advocate, NOLA.com online. I'm also on the editorial board. And our topic today is a deep dive into America's political landscape. Hopefully we'll find some things to talk about with our three terrific writers. Let me introduce them briefly. Jonathan Alter, to my left, has written for many media outlets over his career, including the Old Newsweek, where he was a columnist. He's appeared on television as an analyst, and he's now on Substack. He's the author of 4 books on American presidents, and his newest book is about Donald Trump's criminal trial, just last year. It's called American Reckoning, Inside Donald Trump's Trial and My Own. Okay. Jonathan Martin, this might get confusing with the Jonathans, but we'll muddle through. In the middle is the Politics Bureau Chief and Senior Political Columnist at Politico. He writes a reported column about conversations and big picture trends shaping politics. He has a column just out about the governor's race, senators leaving to run for governor, which is interesting, disillusionment with Washington. He's a former national political correspondent for the New York Times, and he is the co-author of This Will Not Pass, Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future, which focused on the 2020 election, the beginning of the Biden presidency, and of course, January 6th, 2021. And then at the end, yes?
Thank you.
Down the end, we have Tim Miller, who is the host of the Bulwark podcast and an MSNBC political analyst. He was, in his past life, he was a Republican strategist, communications director for Jeb Bush, spokesman for the RNC, involved in the famous autopsy after 2012, right? 2012 election, which obviously the Republicans have not followed. And he is the author of Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican road to hell. Welcome again.
Hey, y'all.
And I just want to note for all you New Orleanians out there that Jonathan Martin and Tim Miller are New Orleanians these days. So,
Hey!
around.
Wazam.
Roll wave.
What was that?
Roll wave.
Roll wave. There we go. Okay. So obviously this is a current events panel, but it's also a book festival and you're here to sell books. So let's start off at least talking a little bit about your books, or some topics that you covered in the books and kind of how they look from late March 2025. Jonathan Martin and Tim, there's a common theme to your books, and that is this culture of complicity among Republicans in the Trump era. So I'd like to ask you about some of the people you wrote about. Jonathan Martin, you wrote a lot about Kevin McCarthy. I think we're done with him. But Mitch McConnell is still around. And, one of the really striking moments in your book is when you ran into him late at night, January 6, 2021, and had a conversation. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Stephanie, thanks for doing this. And for those of you who don't live in New Orleans, I can't say enough good things about the Times-Picayune. It's one of the great locally owned newspapers in America. And Stephanie writes a fantastic column, and if you don't read it, don't subscribe, please consider doing that. We're facing a lot of challenges in this country, and one of them is sustaining local and regional journalism, and we're lucky in this city to have a fantastic paper. So do that, and also just a shout out to Cheryl Landrew and Walter Isaacson for making this book festival so damn fun.
Yeah.
Though I will say, a little rude for them to put us across from Michael Lewis and John Grisham. We could have got a cleaner slot.
Wait, this is our base here, though.
Okay,
our base. Okay. This is the high octane crowd here, man. All right. Yeah, look, we're packing every inch of it. They're hanging from the rafters, Timo.
Doing okay.
Hanging from the rafters. Yeah, look, I think for all the focus on McConnell blocking Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court, which at the time was seen as this travesty of epic proportions, I think the consequential moment in Mitch McConnell's political life, I think the first paragraph of the obituary is going to be that he had a chance to at least try
Right.
to end Trump and Trumpism in January and February of 2021, and he didn't try.
And what he told you that night was
Because the presumption
Yeah.
that night in the wee hours of then January 7th was, it's curtains. He's done.
done.
He's cooked.
he put a
There's-
gun to his own head.
Yeah, the precise quote was, he put a gun to his head and he pulled the trigger. This is Mitch McConnell talking about Donald Trump to me on the night of January 6th, and the Capitol was ransacked, and we're literally standing in filth that night in the Capitol. And he thought, and like a lot of the smart set did, oh my gosh, he'll never come back from this. And boy, the Democrats will go after him, and he'll be tarnished, and we'll be able to move on, and we'll go back to the party
and
of
I'm
yore.
free of this.
And also, he said, very tellingly, he said basically it was a liberation day for him. He felt exhilarated, he said, because now he was done for good with this meddlesome president.
That's a pretty mild adjective there.
Didn't work out that way.
Did not, yeah.
And what I'm curious about is if McConnell ever comes out and says
it,
Deus must
because
be
he's doing a round of interviews now that he's no longer majority leader. He's, he took a few votes that were off the reservation. They ended up not being significant. That was against Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy. But
And Hegseth, they came the closest to, and obviously we've all read now about what happened with Tillis that day, and that would have torpedoed Hegseth. But yeah, no, he obviously is now in the rank and file and is trying to carry the banner for a kind of Reaganite foreign policy, and there's just obviously less of an appetite for that in today's Republican Party, to put it mildly.
Right.
As J.D. Vance returns from prospecting Greenland for our
yes,
expedition.
where no people from Greenland would meet with him. Tim, you wrote, part of your book is about your own culpability, people who you worked with who kind of set the stage for Trumpism, is the way you explained it. But then you also have this kind of fabulous section where you have kind of portraits in complicity and profiles of people you know quite well. And it's people like Reince Priebus and Lindsey Graham, Sean Spicer, but the one that I've been thinking about this week is Elise Stefanik.
That's a shame for Elise, isn't it?
Yeah, poor baby, poor dear, what happened to her? Yes.
So close.
But kind of, in some ways, poetic, just.
Was it? I mean,
it was Trump himself who did it, too, by the way.
it was. And again, you talk about when she first ran in
One bad poll.
16.
Yeah.
She wouldn't even say his name. She was so, set on distancing herself. And then we know what.
Yeah, it was her second election in 16. And she had run in 14, but in the 16
Okay.
election, she wouldn't even say his name. She wouldn't endorse him. She wouldn't talk about it. And that went all the way through, at some point in early 2018, right? Even into 2017, she was recruiting a friend of mine to run for Congress under the auspices of, we need more people like us here, within the conference to combat, the MAGA turn of the party. And so obviously she just totally flipped on a dime. And I think that probably the example of Elise is probably the most relevant of all the ones that I have in the book, because she was just such a prime example of the way that the autopsy, of the reform of the party that kind of party elites wanted. When she initially ran in 2014, it was...
She ghosted it, right, the autopsy?
Yeah, she ghost wrote it. Yeah, she ghost wrote the autopsy. Yeah. And so she was running pro-climate change,
Right.
Gay, immigration reform. We need to soften on cultural issues like gay rights. How's all this gone? And she, at the time, a lot of people that worked for her that I interviewed for the book, 'cause they're all my friends, it was really sad actually, because they were all very excited that oh, this is kind of a new a modern Republican Party, something to get excited about. All those people end up getting fired, and she replaces them with basically the intern, who is a MAGA person, who ends up becoming her key advisor, who does the tweets for her now that she does the Trump imitation tweets, and she just totally does a flip to kind of be the person that's best representative of, maybe J.D. Vance, I guess, the second best representative of the pivot to what kind of a MAGA Trumpist future party would look like. So unfortunately for her, I guess J.D. at least got his rewards on that, which was, if you call being sent to Nuke to stand at in a military installation, the reward, but she didn't. She got pulled back from UN, which I think is relevant to the political part of this, to where we are now in politics. Like, the only reason she got pulled back from that is because they can already see 2 months and change in, like, the political vulnerability that they have, right? And, like, they lose this state Senate seat in Pennsylvania that was Trump plus 15, and, you know, Mike Waltz, this election is on Tuesday. The guy running to replace him probably wins, but the fact that it's only a probably is very telling. That was, I think, a Trump plus 20 district, and so they couldn't risk it. They couldn't risk having her seat be open. And so they had to pull her back, and I don't know. Now, does she even get to be in leadership again, Jonathan? What happens to her?
I think they'll find her a slot at the adults table in the House. Okay. But it may be kind of like pulled over in like one of the smaller chairs.
Smaller chairs.
Yeah. But they'll find some make work deal for her.
She won by 15 last fall, but Trump's tweet suggests that MAGA's really vulnerable in that district.
Yes, right.
So she could conceively
have lost. Or the replacement could have lost.
No, but I'm saying she
in the
could
midterm.
Conceivably.
Her reelect, though.
Yeah.
I mean, if they think that there's
probably
that much erosion, that only she could hold.
I'm pretty sure what happened was that Trump got a pullback, not from New York, but from the Michael Waltz seat Tim just mentioned, which is
in
the
Florida
seat, which is like St. Augustine down to Daytona.
And that's this coming.
Not exactly like the Upper West Side of Manhattan in terms of its political demography. And Waltz won by 1,000 like last year there, and they got a pullback from Trump's actual pollster, Tony Fabrizio, and it had the Democrat narrowly winning the special on dues. I think Tim is right.
Like a math teacher.
The Dem will win. The Dem will lose, but will lose by single digits in a really conservative part of Florida. And so Trump said, well, we got to keep Elise there, and not just that, but make her run for re-election in 2026.
Yeah, right.
Keep her there for like the next 2 years. So
it's a shame.
Do you think she still thinks so? Tim, quickly, you wrote that you thought, deep down, she thought it was worth it. That's what you wrote when you wrote the book. Do you still think that now that she's lost this?
Of course,
she lost her reward. She does not get to be UN ambassador.
Of course she thinks
Of course she thinks it's.
I'm sorry. I know that everybody wants, like, it would be satisfying to think that she was, like, deeply consumed by
Is it because they've
regret.
gone down so far this road that they kind of have to? Her worth. The one that seems, the one person you wrote about that seems like has not.
She would look at me, and honestly, like, I wish this was not true, but she would look at me and be like, your choice was sad. Like, you're sad. Like, you're a podcaster now spitting spitballs, and, like, I got this. Like, I'm still.
I almost got to be UN ambassador.
Right. Maybe she will at some point. That's what she would think. I mean, I don't like that, but I think that's the honest assessment of their of the mindset of her.
Talked to her at all?
The last time Elise messaged me was she sent me a note when I was trying to talk to her for something, and she was like, "I've seen your tweets. I don't think we should be talking anymore." And I was like, "Thanks." Yeah.
Your tweets are pretty awesome, I will say. Everyone should follow him. Jonathan Alter, your book. You embedded yourself in the criminal trial of Donald Trump, which was amazingly less than a year ago. Yeah. It feels like when you're reading the book, it's out of another time. It's less than a year ago, and you didn't know, you had to submit this before you knew how the election was going to come out. So that is a difficult position to be in.
So people, yes, a little bit, but people say to me, oh, your book's out of date. Nobody even remembers what trial that was. Stormy Daniels.
Michael Cohen.
Yeah. And my reaction to that is that in American history, before Trump, there were 2 presidents who had encounters with the criminal justice system, if you exclude Nixon being pardoned, he was never tried, and Bill Clinton had some problems with his law license. But in 1868, Ulysses S. Grant was arrested or got a ticket for driving his carriage too fast on Rock Creek Parkway. And in 1953, Harry Truman got a ticket for driving his car too slow on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And Donald Trump was convicted on 34 felony counts, and as partial result of the Supreme Court decision in January that nobody noticed, he will be, in all likelihood, known in his obituary as a convicted felon. And to me, the trial was a historic event, and you guys didn't get to see it because it wasn't on TV. If it had been on TV, he would not be president. Really? I can assure you. This was a highly dramatic and highly damaging trial to Donald Trump, and also sexy, right? It had all the elements, and there were some boring portions when they were doing the paper trail that created the mountain of evidence, which was just overwhelming evidence of his criminality in this case. But the idea that, oh, this is just, bump in the road, he wasn't, nothing really happened, he won, he didn't get held accountable. I was in the courtroom with them all 23 days for reasons that I can explain, but are a little boring. I was one of the only people who actually had a credential to be in there every day, not in the overflow room, but like just a few feet from this guy. And 8 times a day, when he would walk in and out, when the jury would come in and out, first thing of the day, morning break, lunch, afternoon break, end of the day, this defendant, just a few feet away, as close as I am to the first row, would have to struggle to his feet and pay honor to 12 ordinary men and the alternates. And Viktor Orban doesn't have to do that. Yeah. We still have some accountability. And the judge admonished him many times. He said, I will jail you, Mr. Trump, if you reoffend, meaning attacking witnesses and the jury. And Trump didn't want to go and be over one of those squat toilets without a seat in the Manhattan criminal courthouse. And he was serious. One. He knew the judge was serious, and he didn't reoffend. At that point, he stopped. He had been held in contempt on 10 counts. Now, any other president, imagine them being held in contempt of court. Banner headline. It wasn't even the big story of the day. Right. So this just...
Jonathan, you're a little optimistic about the next 4 years, that you think that his felony convictions are going to be at the top of his obituary? I think that there's going to be a lot worse shit at the top of his obituary.
I didn't say that. To be clear,
that's the
Tim,
question.
I didn't say
you didn't say the top.
Of his obituary.
You used the word
second
reckoning.
Paragraph.
Yes, you used the word reckoning, though. The title of your book is Reckoning. Was, from the perspective of today, was this actually a reckoning?
No, the big jury, the voters, they acquitted.
Yeah.
So, but was there, some measure of accountability? Yes. And the reckoning refers not just to the voters and to Trump, but to me. Yeah. Because a lot of this book is a memoir, or I shouldn't say a lot, just less than half is a memoir of my years covering politics and some of the things that happened to me when I was growing up that gave me my values, like Martin Luther King came to my house when I was 8 years old, because my parents were involved in the civil rights movement.
Chicago,
and I knew,
yeah.
in Chicago, I grew up in Chicago. I've known Barack Obama since he was a state senator, and people in my family knew him before that. My late mother, who was first woman elected in Cook County, knew him years before that. So I have all this. The only reason I mention that is I have all of this sort of stuff going in my head where I truly believed, not in a naive way, but I described myself for years the way John F. Kennedy described himself, which was an idealist without illusions. And I discovered that I had more illusions than I thought I did about the good sense of the American people.
Yeah. So, that just fast forward to this week, because, first of all, kudos to the organizers for planning ahead and inviting Jeffrey Goldberg, because, wow, that's some game here. But, Signalgate, does it matter? Does anything matter? I think back, I actually went back and watched the old Saturday Night Live sketch from, it turns out, very early in the first Trump administration. I didn't even remember it was so early. It was about James Comey. It was when Lester Holt interviewed interviewed Donald Trump, and he said, yeah, I fired him because of Russia. And, they did kind of a takeoff on that, and Michael Che, who was playing Lester Holt, had a producer in his ear, and when that happened in the skit, he says, oh, wait, so did I get him? It's all over? And then the producer is saying, nope, nothing matters, absolutely nothing matters anymore. And then they just plow ahead. And I just feel like we have done that over and over and over again. Is that what this is this week, or could it be something different?
It's a big question. We only have 25 minutes left. Things matter. There are a couple of layers to this, right? The decisions that these guys are making matter. In this case, in Yemen, nothing went bad. Well, we don't actually know. There were civilians that died in that house, and we might have accidentally outed some of our intelligence assets, so maybe that
Again?
mattered.
Yeah.
Again, so maybe that mattered. Obviously, some of the other stuff that is happening right now matters. I'm personally obsessed with the story of the Venezuelan asylees that we've been sending to a gulag in San Salvador. These choices obviously matter in their lives and to their families' lives. I don't know that it matters a ton politically right now. So to that question of does all this stuff matter politically? Yeah, there's some level of political gravity that is going to matter. I mean, if the economy continues to get worse, that is going to matter. If these guys bumble us into some war because they have Jeffrey Goldberg on the signal feed, or because they've decided that that Denmark and Canada are main enemies, yeah, that is going to matter. The things that impact people's lives are going to matter. It's like this story, the the insidery Bulwark podcast, Politico element of the story of how we like the gossip of who was on the chain when, and was that Stephen Miller overruling the vice president? It seemed like it kind of. That's interesting in the gossip. I don't think it'll matter politically, but the fact that it revealed these guys to be pretty incompetent, and that they already have, whatever we are, 67, 70 days in, done real economic damage for no reason at all, just because of their own incompetence. All of that stuff will eventually matter. Maybe not as much in the polls as we want, next week, but I think that it will have an impact.
I think this doesn't matter thing is kind of a dangerous thing for Democrats because it's paralyzing.
Yeah.
And it's not true. So for the 35%, the people in the base, of course it doesn't matter. Nothing would matter. As he said in 2015, he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they'd still vote for him. But the 14% of other Americans who voted for him, many of whom are independents, they voted for him. For a lot of them, it does matter. I saw some pilots were really complaining about this. And there are a lot of people in the military, there are a lot of veterans who know that this was wrong. And even though we're not going to be talking about it a week from now, it's not going to be a first-tier issue in the midterms, but it has an accretion kind of effect where almost without people noticing, certain people will quietly peel off them over this and a variety of other issues. So I've covered every president going back to Carter, and I've interviewed 9 of them. The only one I missed going back to Nixon was Reagan. And one of the only things that they all have in common is whether in a second term or if they're a one-term president at the end of their first term, they've got real political problems because there's a lot of mileage on the truck. And the more time that goes on, more people have reason to be pissed off at you. Now, in the case of Trump, they forgot why they were pissed off at him, from his first term, because that's the kind of amnesia society that we live in. But the accretion effect still applies.
So, you mentioned the fact that this trial was not televised, and I'm thinking there is something that there is video of and that has been played very widely is that student from Tufts University, the graduate student, pulled off the street by the ICE soldiers. How much do we need a visual for people to kind of really feel it?
Not to trigger this crowd, but John's talk about that trial not being televised is something I think about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it had a transformative effect in that crucial period of 2024. Here's something to think about. That trial is in April. Joe Biden, in mid-May, comes out one morning, out of the blue seemingly, and says, I challenged Donald Trump to 2 debates. In fact, let's do the first one in June. That challenge, and what happened in that June debate? Do you all remember that debate last June? Trigger warning. That challenge to do that debate is not thrown out there by Biden if they aren't desperate at that point. Biden's numbers were terrible, and that trial wasn't televised, and so it didn't cut ice politically like it would have if it had. And so Biden probably never offers that challenge, and there's never that June debate if that trial is televised.
And then,
that's just my sense.
I agree with that. Oh,
So on the question of the folks being pulled off the street, yeah, I mean, that video is jarring in a lot of ways. I think just from a raw political standpoint, I think that the combination of Trump tariffs pushing us toward a recession, daily market dives doing grave damage to 401ks, Elon taking the proverbial chainsaw to various politically dicey
Things people care
institutions,
about
the
and
VA.
people they know.
Yeah. I think the combination of Elon and Trump and then the incompetence that we saw in Signalgate, I think those three things are probably, politically speaking, more consequential than what they're doing now for migrants.
I agree with what Jonathan is saying here, but I do I do also caution, and this is the politics panel, so we got to talk politics.
Yeah,
That we're going to be hacks. But like the midterms is what, 15 months away? Yeah. Like we don't really know. Like we don't really. If I had to bet, the three things Jonathan said would matter. But we don't know what these guys are going to do. I know they're all they've done so far is pull a couple people off the street. That video of that woman Ozturk is insane. I mean, like there's 6 masked, hooded guys that come up to her as like she's no threat. She's a 30-year-old. It's not like there's a worry that she's armed or whatever. It's a 30-year-old grad student. And they come up to her in an unmarked car, they grab her, they throw her in the car. We just don't know what these guys are going to do for the next 15 months. And I do think that there is a category of people, look, I mean, your guy's boy, Andrew Sullivan, you remember Andrew Sullivan? He was like pretty neutral to Trump, really neutral to maybe slightly pro-Trump over Kamala. He was screaming yesterday about how fascism is coming. There is a group of people who are not in the 35% of the base, who are free speech people, who believe in free speech, who had genuine criticisms about whatever, cancel culture or whatever. And if these guys keep pulling people off the streets, that could spark something. I mean, we haven't seen the protests that we saw in 2017. That could spark protests. And we don't kind of know, there's a butterfly flapping its wings element to this. We don't really know what will be the thing that lights a spark and lights a fire. And so I always want to push back against people don't care about the foreign Tufts gal who got pulled off the street by 6 guys pretending like they were in Homeland. And I'm like, I don't know, are we sure? I don't know, maybe people care about it if it actually, is delivered to them,
or
and if they see it.
Well,
or part of a broader pattern.
So people might assume that nobody cares about, the judiciary and them not believing in the rule of law and them not believing in due process, all the bedrock ideas of our republic, which are all we're not headed to a constitutional crisis. We are in a constitutional crisis right now. And in some ways, it's worse than a constitutional crisis, because crisis denotes something of short duration. We are amid a sustained effort to change the entire constitutional order, which begins with, in their case, with beginning to disobey court orders, which, that part of it I actually don't think they're going to get away with for reasons we can discuss, but the fact that they're attempting it now, and the fact that they are suspending due process in a way that even if you include World War II, and by the way, the 1798 Alien Act is about what you do in wartime. So just to give you an example, it's not comparable to what was done with the internment of the Japanese. They were American citizens, and Roosevelt was violating other laws. But where they did apply the 1798 was to these Nazi saboteurs who came ashore on Long Island. They were given a hearing, even during wartime. We don't deprive anybody of their day in court. We've never spirited people out of the country, as is going on right now. We've got the woman from Tufts who had the temerity to write an op-ed piece.
Co-author. Wasn't even her piece.
And the Russian woman who is a researcher at Harvard, who had the temerity to be against Putin. They weren't going to jail her until it came out that she was anti-Putin, and it had to leave the country for that reason, leave Russia. They're in Louisiana. They're in Basile, Louisiana, in the facility, in the ICE facility, 2.5 hours from here. Yeah. and nobody's seen them yet, you know? So this is not something that might happen. It's happening. Yeah. And people have to get used to the fact that we're
I think we're headed toward a moment of truth on the Supreme Court in which Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Roberts are going to face an agonizing choice on a number of these cases, and they're going to face enormous pressure from Donald Trump and his lieutenants. And I think that is then going to cause a larger crisis within the Republican Party, because Donald Trump will demand the impeachment of those Supreme Court justices if they vote down his.
Who Mitch McConnell delivered.
I'm not sure they will. I think it's an open question. When you look at, you remember the shot in Congress when he gave his speech a few weeks ago, and he says to Roberts, says, "Thank you, I'll remember what you did for me." And you see a shot of Coney Barrett, she's going, she's disgusting, right?
That's what I'm saying.
No, but I'm saying Brett Kavanaugh was roommates with Judge Boasberg. So I think the three of them will hold firm. Where I don't agree with you is I think it's much easier for them to defy lower court orders than it is for them to go into active defiance of the Supreme Court. And as far as impeachment goes, and Roberts just attacked the idea of impeachment, impeaching judges, 67 votes. So I think the people like you will say immediately when they start talking about impeachment, it ain't going to happen, right? So them threatening impeachment, I'm not sure cuts that much out.
Well, yeah, I guess what I'm talking about is the reaction to those folks holding firm. Because if Roberts and Kavanaugh and Barrett or some combination of the three do the right thing and stand by the Constitution, then the backlash from Trump and MAGA is going to be intense, and Trump will demand their impeachment. Then what happens in Congress? I guess.
See, I don't think that's the way it's going to play out, because Trump's going to win on certain big issues, like getting rid of independent regulatory agencies. It's going to be a huge victory for Trump. And like the NLRB is the first case coming up. That's going to just be his puppet, and regular terms out the window. This will be a huge change in American government and a big Trump victory. So the Supreme Court will, have some wins for Trump and some losses for Trump, and I think that will prevent the huge backlash that you're talking about.
Can I, we're watching the clock here.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. This is great, but I want to make sure that we get to the Democrats.
Great. I got some thoughts.
Okay, so what are they doing? What can they do? It feels like the only, of the kind of old guard, the only person out there who seems to be meeting the moment somewhat is Bernie Sanders. And maybe not.
I'm telling you, I'm going to start wearing a Field of Burn tee soon if the rest of these people don't start doing anything. So we're going to be stuck with him. Just another 82-year-old nominee in 2028. Why not?
No. But like, who's out there? What's next? How can they get their mojo?
AOC was out there with them, obviously, and there have been people that are speaking out. Chris Murphy is speaking on certain things. Wes Moore speaking on certain things. The problem is that there was this collective action problem back in the 2016 primary that we had. Like, nobody ever went after Trump because it was never in anybody's individual interest to do it. It was in the group. It was in the group interest. And I think that there are a lot of Democrats who are particularly those who are in swing states, the types of people that you would think, the 2028 types, the Shapiros, the Whitmers, the whoever.
Right.
And I think that they've decided, I think wrongly, that it's in their individual interest to kind of hang back, be appealing, pick your spots, challenge him on.
A couple months ago, we were talking about governors. We were saying that was the hope, those governors.
And we're seeing this from Newsom. It's we're gonna, I'll talk to the other side. We're gonna show that we've learned things from the loss. This is
They're so scarred by last.
Yeah, they're scarred. This is the conventional wisdom. The right thing to, and honestly, maybe that's right. Maybe Trump is such a disaster that it doesn't make any sense for them to get out in front of the Oz-Turk-Tufts issue, because that could, that could hurt their brand with a certain group of people or whatever, and that the right thing to do is to hold their fire. The problem with that is that you can't build a real movement of opposition against this president if there's not somebody leading it.
Right.
You have to try. You have to have leaders of the opposition. And I think the moment that we're in is really more akin to Hungary. You've already mentioned Orban. And nobody looks at Hungarian dissidents and they're like, have you thought about whether, this protest that you're doing is going to backfire in the pest region at the polls next year. So, right? Like that doesn't happen, right? Because people understand that the challenges are greater than just kind of rank politics. And no Democrats are right now Bernie and AOC kind of, but like nobody else are really channeling the anger and the frustration out there and like channeling it towards something productive. And to me, like that's the thing that's frustrating. Like we go back to what you were saying about our long-running constitutional crisis. Well, nobody is going to, like, the tough situation or the Venezuelan situation is not going to be an issue if no Democrats talk about it.
Right.
And no Democrats talk about it. To make something an issue, you have to talk about it. And you have to talk about it with emotion and passion, and you have to talk about how angry you are and how un-American this is, and you have to humanize these people and say we need to protect them.
Right.
But
But none of them are doing it.
So
Because they think it might backfire politically. That's the reason why they're
there are
not.
actually some encouraging signs, and I'm not
Right.
trying to be Pollyannish about this, but
That was
it's
gonna be one
coming
of my
from
questions.
the grassroots. It's town meetings. And
That's true.
town meetings in many ways are more effective than big protests where all they're measuring is, was it as big as the last month's protest, you know? In town meetings, they're having discussions, and voters get up and start talking about people being spirited away in the middle of the night. The politicians will start to respond. Washington's always the last place that gets the memo.
That's
You
true.
know, so this is in the hands of the American people, and there are some very positive signs at the local level, including in some red districts. That's why Stefanik is not going to the UN.
Look, I think there is a real grassroots backlash building. I covered the 2017, 2018 backlash to Trump. I think this is in some ways bigger than that because you have the Elon accelerant on top of the Trump backlash, kind of the PCP on top of the usual drug. And so that's powerful. But look, I mean, I'm also going to be straight with you guys and tell you something that you don't want to hear. Democrats can take back the House in 26. There's no question about it. I think today it's more likely than not. They can win in 2028 based upon Trump fatigue, and they get back the blue wall because they have a pretty damn good candidate to be named later. I just have a hard time seeing how Democrats are going to win back the Senate anytime soon. I don't see how they're going to have full control of Washington and be able to get a lot done. I think we're in for a protracted period of political trench warfare because of the nature of our country's polarization. And Democrats, if only we go on Elon, go on Rogan, and no, you are not even in the conversation to win a single voter in these states that all get 2 senators. When Obama was president of the United States, not a long time ago, Democrats had the Senate seats in the 2 Dakotas in Montana. 5 of the 6 seats in those 3 states were Democratic senators. That's like not going to happen again in our lifetime.
Right.
So I don't know what the fix is. The House, I can see. White House, a little tougher, but it's doable. I just don't see how they get back the Senate because of
the
their
structural
fundamental challenge
issues.
with working class voters.
And also the structural issues of the.
I don't agree with that.
In hindsight, Biden should have made Puerto Rico and D.C. states and gotten 4
that
more
would've
Senate
helped.
seats, right? I mean, let's be honest, right?
But
Sure.
I think
Right?
if people thought, oh, all the work I did, it didn't do any good in 2024, but it was very close to being a 57 to 43. Now it's 53-47. That's much easier to overcome in a couple of cycles. If you all and people who helped in these battleground states where Democrats held onto their seats, if you hadn't done that, people think, oh, what I did, nothing. I would agree with you. But if you look at the last 40, 50 years in American politics, there are a lot of examples of really big swings in relatively short periods of time. So when I was working on my Jimmy Carter biography, I was really struck by Nixon in the 72 election. He won 49 states. Right. 4 years later, Carter's president. You know, so these states where you think, oh, the Democrats can't possibly come back, it depends on the candidate. It depends on the context.
But we've had 20 years of competitive presidential elections that are much more reflective of the 19th century's elections than the 20th century's elections, where we have folks in fixed places voting for the same party every 4 years. It happened for the last 20 years.
Yeah, and this is why I think this is the tough thing for that Democrats really have to internalize is just the scale of that problem over the course of the next 10 years, because I agree, the midterms are going to be great for the Democrats. How great they are is going to depend a lot on people power, grassroots, how much they turn out, types of candidates, whether they run candidates in good places. Like, there are a lot of stuff we could talk about. But then after that, you get to the 28 and beyond, and there's a Senate problem, but there's just a broader problem of, like, if you just, in the modern media era, like, Biden is just such an outlier, right? Like, Obama was able to reach out to just such a broad swath of America. He won Indiana, right? And he did so on the back of his charisma. And Trump, say what you want about him, like, was able to get the best numbers among black working class voters of any Republican in a long time, Hispanic working class voters, Asian working class voters. Why? Because, like, his persona and his brand and his communications abilities. And I worry that like what happened in 2022, where the Democrats, like, avoided the red wave and had a good year, is they're like, okay, all we got to do, all we got to do is just kind of run a normal Democrat who's not scary.
Talk about abortion, which nobody's talking about anymore.
Back to normal, talk about abortion. And by the way, that might work again in 2028, like you said, because who the fuck knows? Like, we might be in a depression in 2028. Like, excuse my language.
Well, also, if we don't have a character, a dominant character.
But yeah, we're in a different media time. It's not 72. Like, we're in a different media time, and I just look at the Democratic figures, and a lot of them are just so cautious. They're just they have such valedictorian energy, and, like, AOC is like the exception to that, but she's got her own issues.
Speaking of valedictorians, they have to stop talking like they're in the faculty lounge.
Yeah, right.
It just
or on a
doesn't work.
PowerPoint.
They have to change the language. The media universe is very unfavorable to Democrats right now. They have to do a lot more to build their own media infrastructure where they're just getting killed. But this leadership absence that people keep coming back to, again, if you look at history, the first year, like, say, Jimmy Carter in 1973, which was three years before he was elected. You know where he was in the polls? 0. Somebody said to his mother, Jimmy's running for president, and she said, president of what? Right? So this idea that, like, there are these leaders who are just full-blown, who in the first year of the presidency are going to stand up and take the country by storm. It's never worked that way. There have never been dominant party leaders this early in the cycle. So this is a problem that probably, with any luck, will take care of itself if Democrats can get away from dopey identity politics, from leading with their chin, with things that regular Americans don't like, and just start thinking smart, getting tougher. There's a huge toughness gap between the parties that they have to close. But if they can deal with some of these problems, they can live to fight another day.
Okay, 2 minutes left. I would love to hear, give us a Democratic and a Republican name we should be watching once we get past this era for the future. Who do you have your eye on?
For the future?
For the future.
Okay, bear down, everybody. The Republican future is essentially J.D. Vance or Tucker or Barrett or one of the Trump kids. That's it.
Oh, boy.
There's honestly not even.
I was going to ask.
You're welcome to try to provide another name, but, like, really, that's it. And it might be Trump himself, actually. And look, again, on the Democratic thing, I just think people need to deprogram themselves, because, like, a lot of them talk in the right way to win a Senate seat in California, right? Talking the right way to do well on Louisiana boy Theo Von's podcast is just like a whole different type of speaking. They got to deprogram themselves. Who can do it? I don't know. I had Wes Moore on the pod last week. I like him. I think 50% of the time he can do it. 50% of the time he sounds like he's doing a PowerPoint. And it's like, can we, over the course of 3 years, can we deprogram him? Maybe. But I think that the same problem of basically every other name you mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah, I think AOC is somebody who has got a great talent at AOC fans here. And what I think is the signal Democratic challenge, which is breaking through in a 7-second media culture. Donald Trump went to the McDonald's drive-thru and broke the internet. Kamala Harris went to the Ellipse and gave a speech to close the campaign that could have happened in 1987 or 1967. Where they released the excerpt, she gave a big, formal, full-dress speech. Like, the two Americas, the two parties, the two means of communication in those two moments in October of last year tell you everything about where Democrats need to fix themselves, and I think AOC, obviously, at least in terms of breaking through, has that capacity. I think Fetterman does too. I just don't.
Fetterman can't talk anymore.
Path for him. I don't see a path for him, but he's got the same talent for breaking. Who can break through? That to me is the key for Democrats. On the Republican side, I think where Tim and I disagree is here. If Trump's numbers by 2027 have collapsed, not with MAGA, but with the broader country, and he's down to the mid to high 30s at that point. I'm really curious what that primary looks like, because there will be either, you're right, either JD or Tucker will carry the MAGA banner. And I think what will be fascinating to see if there will be somebody, not anti-Trump, but post-Trump.
I'll take one of your gummies.
Post-Trump.
Not Nikki Haley. Okay.
No, but in all seriousness, I think Trump's standing in 27 will shape what happens in 28 on the Republican
That makes sense.
side.
Okay, really quickly, Jonathan.
Okay, so people can surprise you. So JFK and Obama were both bad speakers early in their career. So people can improve. So you could see somebody like Chris Murphy bringing up his skills. He's broken through a little bit. You could see somebody like Jason Crow, who made a dent this week.
2 Jason Crow fans out there. He represents my childhood district in Colorado. What's
early.
up?
You can't expect
Speaking of
him.
Rocky Mountain High, there you go.
You can't expect these people to get applause at this point in the cycle. That's my whole point, right?
Yeah.
So there is hope. On the Republican side, I think it could be, I think they've had good luck with somebody from outside of politics. So Tucker is interesting, or it could be a business person that we're not thinking about, that comes in who's never held elective office.
In March of 2005, when in this same crowd, there would have been talk about the Jesus land map of red and blue America, and will Democrats ever win back a single seat ever again, or have Karl Rove and George W. Bush pick the lock forever? Not a lot of folks would have been saying, yeah, you know what the key for us in 2008 is? Let's find a black guy from Chicago with a Muslim name.
Yeah, right.
And he'll be the salvation, and he'll carry Indiana and North Carolina in a landslide
Good
3.5 years from now.
Okay.
Things change rapidly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey,
That's a
I just
great
want to say
place
I
to
love being
end.
here in New Orleans. I appreciate you all welcoming us here.
Okay.
Thank you.